This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, July 8th, 2021, and my guest is the awesome Sascha Segan of PCMag. Hi, Sascha. How are you?
Hi, Miriam. I'm doing really well. I'm really happy to be on this podcast with you.
I'm so glad. You kind of missed our group podcast in New York a few weeks back, so I was like, I got to get Sascha on. And I thought this Qualcomm phone would really be the thing. And then the C-band article you just published. So we're going to talk about this. Frankly, I kind of want you on because there's a few things that are happening that are really exciting. The C-band thing obviously is very US-centric, but I think you're going to tell us in a second that it does apply to other geographies in many ways. But also this proliferation of affordable 5G phones. Until now, it was a rest of the world thing. We saw some $200 MediaTek Dimensity 700 phones out there from Poco and, Realme, but we hadn't seen anything for the US. And we covered it last week, but T-Mobile kind of threw us on a tailspin with this $200 Revel, which is made by TCL, it looks like. But let's maybe jump in on that. And I'm just going to quickly mention for the audience that my TCL 20 Pro 5G review, which we discussed extensively last week, is up on hothardware.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. So $200 phone for US markets. What's your take on this?
So T-Mobile right now has a massive amount of unused 5G capacity. They have been spending the past year building out 5G capacity across the country, and they now cover 150 million people with their mid-band. They cover 300 million people with their low band, and people who don't have 5G phones cannot access any of this. People who don't have 5G phones are all getting crammed into the 4G end of the spectrum. So right. T-Mobile needs to transition their user base over to 5G. Over to all of this extra capacity they've been building. And so that means that they need to dramatically bring phone prices down. They need to put 5G phones into everyone's hands. And I am moderately sure they're subsidizing this one. Yeah,
probably. I mean, obviously the OnePlus Nord N200 5G the week before, which I also reviewed, was $240, a pretty great deal for that phone. It's a better phone than the TCL in some ways, but I think that TCL Revel. Sorry, I know that they're probably not going to like me saying that, but it's clearly a TCL 20 SE with a Dimensity 700, right? And a few cosmetic tweaks, right? Like all the Revels have been like a Moto or something in the past, right?
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, if you look at some of the other white label programs out there, some of the other vendors, even T-Mobile from time to time, have used some OEMs that you don't have a lot of confidence behind, but you can be confident with TCL and Motorola.
Yeah, I think that's always a good, like the Revel phones have always been, I think, pretty good. I mean, they're locked into T-Mobile. That's one of the drawbacks. But in this case, as you said, I think this is, I thought this was T-Mobile flexing. Like, look, we can do a $200 phone. There's 5G in the US and it's not a complete like deadbeat. But I think you're right. It's more like they really need people to transition. And how do we make that happen? Well, we give away free Galaxy A32 5Gs and give away free OnePlus Nord N200 5Gs. I believe that was available for free for a limited time.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of crazy and they're subsidizing it, but I think they can, right? I mean, they obviously, would you say they're the best at handling this 5G transition so far? And do you think this was all planned from the get-go years ago with the Sprint planning, or is it just falling into place and they just lucked out?
I think so far T-Mobile absolutely has delivered the most real 5G network, real 5G build-out and experience of the three major US carriers for the most people. And this was why they bought Sprint. They bought Sprint specifically because they wanted Sprint's 160 megahertz of clear midband to do a nationwide midband 5G network on. This was the purpose of the merger.
And is it ever delicious? When I got 300 megabits down, and 25 megahertz up on the N200 5G when I was reviewing it. I was in Washington State, out in the middle of nowhere, but I'm pretty sure I hit some mid-band because I'd never seen mid-band before. Like, I know if I'm getting up to 100 megabits, it's low band, but like 300 megabits, that sounds like mid-band to me. Because wow, like that was brilliant. Like I was like, okay, this is the future. This is the future I want to live in, where I'm in the middle of nowhere and it's faster than any cable internet I could get.
Yeah, and that's really just the start. I mean, 300 megabits, as T-Mobile goes to a full 100 megahertz bandwidth on its mid-band, we should be seeing 500, 600, 700 megabits with any luck.
Well, I'm there for it. As a T-Mobile customer, I can't complain. I feel like, in the early days, people thought I was crazy when I joined VoiceStream. Remember that? Back in 1999, 2000. And then they became T-Mobile, and they had, get this, you probably remember this, a $5 a month unlimited data plan on GPRS.
Oh, at one point, they had a $2.99 a month unlimited T-Zones add-on.
I remember the T-Zones add-on just being $5 though. But anyway, I got that, and I was like, I had a T68i Sony Ericsson, and I tethered that thing via Bluetooth to, like Bluetooth done, dial-up networking, to everything I had forever. And people thought I was nuts. They're like, you're like on slower than edge. But like, look, it's working. Like, you have no internet. I have some internet. Okay.
Well, if you want to go down that road, so when I first moved back to the States after a couple of years abroad when I was young in 1999, I was homeless is too strong a word, but I was couch surfing,
right?
And I needed to job hunt. And I didn't really have any way to get online or a fixed phone number. So I went out to Bell Atlantic 9X Mobile and I got a Qualcomm QCP 1960 thin phone.
Oh, yeah.
And was able to hook it up to my laptop as a circuit switch 9600 baud modem to get at the job ads.
See, I only ever had CDMA for voice. Like when I was in Canada still, before I moved to the US in Vancouver, I bought a Sony CDMA phone of some kind that one of the virtual network operators over there had. And then I switched over to a Sanyo of some kind, because, Sanyo made a lot of the Sprint kind of phones, and there was an equivalent carrier. ClearNet was my carrier in Canada.
Yeah, and ClearNet is now TELUS.
Exactly. And so basically, I had CDMA phones for voice. And then when I came to the US, I had read about this newfangled, which wasn't newfangled, but newfangled GSM thing in Europe. And being a good European, born and raised there, I was like, I know the Europeans know how to standardize things. It's going to be better than this American CDMA crap. And so I was like...
So you went to your OmniPoint.
And mostly it was the data that I was excited about. So I just went with VoiceStream, which I think I joined like a week before they turned into T-Mobile. And so then I had that for a while, and I never left. And so I was in pain during the 3G days. Remember when everyone had 3G, but T-Mobile had Edge, and it was a nightmare. That's the only pain I've ever felt being with that carrier.
Well, now, do we want to talk about my Qualcomm QCP 1960 phone? Because
we are, but I think we should. I don't know how we should get to. I want to get to the Qualcomm phone, but also want to get to your C-band, and then I want to get to the madness of U.S. carriers with the adaptive sound from Verizon. How do we get to all three of those in some way?
Okay, so we start talking about how Qualcomm said on a call recently that they are not a phone maker. But you and I know the secret truth.
I have to read this quote, okay? It's too good. Hang on. Let me go to your story on the Qualcomm, because I laughed so hard when I read this. It was brilliant. Let's see. Where is it? You said something amazing. Okay. It says, Qualcomm wants to make it clear that while this phone is good, it's not better than any other Qualcomm-based phones, even though it is. But it also isn't. You got that? And I laughed because it's totally what they did, isn't it?
Yeah. So to fill people in here, Qualcomm didn't announce. Did Qualcomm announce? We're not entirely sure. A phone exists. We know it is made by Asus. It is called the Smartphone for Snapdragon Insiders, or in my mind, the SSI, and it costs $1,500. And it is, from Qualcomm's perspective, a sort of reference device.
Right.
Which contains as many Snapdragon capabilities as possible that you might have heard demoed, but didn't necessarily make it into other Snapdragon partner devices like Samsung's or LG's or Motorola's. But Qualcomm, and this is part of Qualcomm's Snapdragon Insiders program, which is this fan program that they have where you can sign up and, feel parasocially connected to Qualcomm.
You get a newsletter right now is basically what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what's funny about this, so for years at Qualcomm Snapdragon Summits, which are their annual event every December, they show off the new capabilities in Snapdragon. And then all of us say to the Qualcomm people, yeah, but are these going to make it into any phones after Samsung gets done with them?
Right.
And Qualcomm's answer is, eh. And so this phone can be interpreted as a little bit of a rebuke to that, showing off the features, except Qualcomm is so nervous about offending any of its partners,
and they should be,
in the slightest. Yes.
I get it. Like, they should be. This is not, as you said in your article, this is not a Microsoft or Google thing, right? Where like this could potentially be a threat if, they did it the wrong way. Although I think they're really downplaying it a little too much. Like, I really think, like, does Samsung have to worry about this? Nope. Not with the, I just checked it out just for giggles, but you can actually get the fully loaded Snapdragon S21 Ultra right now, the 256 gig version, for less than $1,100. So that's still a huge disparity in price. And frankly, you could argue that it's still a better phone because of its camera setup, right? So I think, like, people are not going to go out and buy this phone. I think this phone, to me, it goes back to what you're saying about the Summit that Qualcomm has regularly. And that's that, these phones are essentially reference devices. They look and feel a lot like the phones we get to touch, handle, play with at the Summit. And to me, they're like, why don't we make one that's a little less, like developer-y, has little holes for the antennas and stuff. And we cover the holes and we make that for the fans. And I think that's very smart because, look, I'm sure Foxconn or whoever, Pegatron or whoever has been making these phones for them, they still have to make a few hundred at least, right? So
yeah, I mean, well, this is Asus. Does Asus make their own phones? Asus has a whole manufacturing business.
Exactly. Asus has done like that kind of ODM stuff for others before anyway, so it's not, but I'm just saying, like, maybe the other ones were Asus as well. I just thought they were Foxconn or Pegatron or whatever, but yeah. I think this is smart. I mean, I don't think they're going to sell a lot of them, but if you're a gamer, this phone could be very compelling because it does have essentially a lot of the specs you see on the Asus, the ROG Phone 5, and then a lot of specs you see on the Red Magic phones, right? Which are a lot more affordable, but the software is not going to suck unlike Red Magic, so.
But I think what is going to attract some people to this device is that it is stock Android.
Right, and all the bands.
Right, and we'll get to that in a sec. That's how we segue to C-band.
Okay, good. So let's hold that off.
Okay.
Let me ramble some specs. So this is like a 6.78 inch display with 1080p. It's 144 hertz refresh. That sounds like a Samsung panel to me. Again, it's probably the same.
It is a Samsung panel. They say that in the spec sheet.
Yeah, it's the same panel we've seen on the Red Magic phones and the ROG phones. Nothing wrong.
That said, no big names do 144 hertz in the US.
No big names. But right. Is Qualcomm making a niche phone a big name?
No. I mean, they're a big name.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, Red Magic has a 144 hertz and ROG phone has the Red Magic's current is 165 hertz with the same panel. And I think ROG has 144. So I think, look, whatever. But yeah. I think, honestly, if I were worried right now as an OEM or whatever, it would be Asus ROG that should worry about. This is the closest thing to an ROG phone without trigger buttons in terms of specs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the cameras don't suck, which, I mean, at least technically, which is, kind of getting rare to see a flagship that has 3 proper discrete cameras that are all useful, including an OIS main camera. The OIS is getting dropped left, right, and center on flagships right now. And then this ultra wide with autofocus, so you can double as a macro, which OnePlus is doing. And then a proper 3x telephoto, only 8, right? But whatever, that'll still help you and do something proper because it's got OIS.
And then one of my big curiosities there, of course, is that at Snapdragon Summit, Qualcomm always loves to show off its choice camera algorithms.
Right.
And especially things involving AI zoom and AI camera transition and taking in 3 feeds from all 3 different cameras to make it look like you have one camera that has a huge range of zoom. And I'm interested to see if they can make that work.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm really mostly worried about the software on this thing because stock Android is a little scary. Like, we want it, but, we have to remember the Google experience is the Pixel launcher and Pixel enhancements over stock Android. Oxygen OS is Oxygen OS. It is still a skin on top of Android. So, we love those because they're lightweight and very quick. But here's the question, right? It's like, I've played with some of those developer phones from Qualcomm, and there's nothing on them. Like, even some features you take for granted might not be on there. So I hope that it's at least a little enhanced with some things that ASUS, did their thing like they do. They do a very lightweight build on like the Asus Zenfone 8 that I reviewed recently. It's very, very stock. So hopefully it's that level of stock, not like pure stock, because pure stock you don't want.
That said, this being $1,500 and only being sold to Snapdragon Insiders, that probably overlaps heavily with the readership of XDA developers.
Exactly. So all of XDA developers and Reddit is going to buy this phone. Other things that stood out for me, of course, is that it has the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, but on the back, and it does kind of stick out like a sore thumb, along with the Snapdragon logo that glows. The design on this thing, you can tell they don't want it to be pretty, right? Because it's really not. It's kind of an ugly duckling of a phone. I hate to say this, Qualcomm, but
I mean, Qualcomm has never been the house for attractive industrial design.
No, but ASUS could have pepped it up a little bit, maybe. Then again,
I would argue ASUS has also never been the house for attractive industrial design.
You're right. I was gonna say the Zenfone 8 is just almost generic. It feels like the generic phone that should be in every screenshot of every ad of every app.
Yeah.
Anyway, it also comes with all the Snapdragon Snapdragon sound stuff, including some Master Dynamic rebranded earbuds, true wireless. Do those have ANC? I hope they do at that price.
Yes.
Good. And then, do we know the battery size on this thing?
4,000.
That's not that great for this kind of... I mean, it's a Snapdragon 888, and we know, again, sorry Qualcomm, but it's not the most efficient chip from all our benchmarks. I mean, it delivers in performance, there's no doubt about it, but even the 865 seems to be a little bit more thrifty with power. So, but hey, it's got the 65-watt Quick Charge 5 that I think the only other phone I have in my stable that has that right now is the Red Magic 6, actually.
And I think you pointed out 2 big things there that Qualcomm wants to get out into the wild, and this is part of the purpose of this phone, and that for some reason their OEM partners have not been taking up, and that is Quick Charge 5, which they offered up last year, and as you said, only Red Magic has taken them up on that, and Snapdragon Sound, which they've been pushing very heavily, and so far only Xiaomi have taken them up on that. And so they want to get those features out there so that hopefully someone else will buy those features.
So, the thing with Red Magic, though, is I just posted my Red Magic 6 unboxing video last night, actually. I've had it for a while, but I'm actually currently reviewing the Red Magic 6R Racing, which is it looks like a flagship, not like a gaming phone, but it is a gaming phone, and it's even cheaper than the Red Magic 6 because there's no fan in it. That phone, the 6 that we're talking about with the Quick Charge 5, doesn't come with a 65-watt charger in the box. It comes with a 30-watt charger in the box. So even though, Sascha, they've achieved shipping a Quick Charge 5 phone in the US, the charger in the box is 30 watt.
Why?
I don't know, because it's a $599 phone.
Yeah.
They're probably trying to save a bit of money. You can buy the accessory charger. It's like $49 or something. Yeah.
Oh, that's so Apple.
Well, yeah, but at that price point, remember the 6 is $599, but the Red Magic 6R that I'm reviewing right now is $499 with a Snapdragon 888 and US 5G sold officially in the US.
Okay, that's really affordable.
And that the 6R I don't think has Quick Charge 5, but I can check and let you know. But anyway, look, the reality is this is interesting to me. And the fact that they didn't skimp on the cameras, you know, hopefully we can see, as you said, some of those great Qualcomm Snapdragon camera features.
And then the other big thing in there is the radios.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because you're the expert in that. Like, it seems to me that you can get every band in the known universe right now.
Pretty much, yeah. So the dark secret of phones not being able to be used across carriers or across borders is that these are all OEM and carrier choices.
Right.
When OEMs decide to make a phone that has US 5G bands and not European 5G bands or vice versa, it's not that it's technically impossible. It's that it's cheaper for them to do 2 SKUs.
Yeah.
And
a lot of that to do with the power amplifiers and things like that, you know, and the number of antennas and the positioning of the antennas, especially once you start adding millimeter wave to the equation, right?
Right. And so this bad boy has everything. It has millimeter wave bands that aren't even being used yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it has, because Qualcomm millimeter wave is something that they are very, very into. And they have European millimeter wave bands that have not quite been implemented yet in this Snapdragon phone.
This is fun. Hey, speaking of which, I know I'm kind of going back a bit, but T-Mobile's millimeter wave, what's going on with that?
They won't give me a really straight answer on that.
And they're not shipping any phones other than the Samsungs and the iPhones with it.
Yeah, there's the Samsungs, the iPhones, the OnePlus 9 Pro.
Oh, right. Does it support millimeter wave on T-Mobile though?
Yeah. I've tested it.
Okay, I thought it was Verizon only. Unfortunately, I do not have T-Mobile's millimeter wave here at all. I do have Verizon a block down the street. Like, I literally, round the corner from my place, you've been to my place, if I go down the street, around the corner, I have like a Pico cell right there, sitting there from Verizon.
So when I've talked to T-Mobile about millimeter wave recently, they've basically said they're installing it for 2 purposes. One is they're installing it in stadiums, convention centers, specific venues that have an extremely high density of peak users.
Makes sense.
Number 2 is they're going to install it for supplementary capacity for their home internet product in areas where it makes sense and they have too many people trying to sign up for home internet.
Yeah, I like it, but it's a one-trick pony, right? Like, if I want to upload a video to YouTube real fast, I just go down the street, put it on my Verizon phone and upload it. Like, that's basically... It's very cool. You get 3 gigabits down and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's how fast this is. It's really nice. But like, I think you're right. The high density places is where we're going to see it. And now that COVID is, you know, somewhat under control, I think that we're going to probably start seeing some use cases in public spaces that might make sense. I was just wondering if you know anything about I'm not even going to talk about AT&T 5G at all, because it seems like AT&T is just anti-5G, because honestly, every phone that I get to review right now, even though it's sold in the US and it's unlocked, it says, oh, sorry, we don't support AT&T 5G. Are they gatekeeping? Are they IMEI filtering? I'm wondering what's going on. Do you know?
Oh, they're absolutely IMEI filtering.
But why? They never used to do this for 4G. What's wrong with them?
It is so AT&T's 4G network there's something involving their 4G network and fallback to UMTS for voice calling.
Okay.
Which means that I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe the situation is that their 4G network is included in the standards bubble, which says a UMTS phone needs to accept any SIM card that's compatible.
Okay.
But 5G is not. And so you can filter 5G to your heart's content.
And they are, because I can't get 5G to work on any of the Chinese phones. And I look at the bands listed, I'm like, it's all there. What gives? And I got 5G activated SIMs on AT&T. I pay for it. And I've got like the right APN set and just nothing.
This is just AT&T voice over Wi-Fi all over again.
Right.
where they will only support voice over Wi-Fi on their own sold phones or a very small list of certified phones. And I mean, honestly, AT&T does not care about the long tail of the smartphone model market. You know,
Right.
they've always
know
been, yeah. I mean,
But it's pretty hostile. I think, look, you could get a hat tip to users that might be on your network that want to use some cool phones, right? Like with an understanding that they can like sign a term of service on the screen that says, we're not going to support 911 in this area or whatever, you're SOL. That way they cover themselves legally. But I still would love to be able to click it on like I have. There are some 5G phones I get that are not US phones that work great on T-Mobile. You don't see T-Mobile like filtering on stuff. And they don't have a legal disclaimer protecting them.
T-Mobile has always just been more open on that because they're the underdog.
I know they really are. Yeah. Are they still the underdog? I kind of feel like they're the leader in 5G now.
But they like to think of themselves as the underdog.
Yeah, they branded themselves. It's like OnePlus did for a while, right? It's very clever. And in fact, OnePlus and T-Mobile was a marriage that, I actually had that conversation with John Ledger back in the day. At one of the first Un-Carrier events in Seattle, I talked with him and I said, that's when they launched you could borrow an iPhone 5, remember, to test on their network for free. Anyway, I said to him, John, you guys need to talk to OnePlus. Like, this would be a marriage made in heaven.
Okay, so this
happened.
Okay, wait. So you were going from one direction and I was going from the other because at roughly the same time...
Oh, and I also told OnePlus. Yeah,
I was like on the phone with like Carl Pei.
Yeah.
And he was like, well... what's our next step? And I
like
said,
US carriers, T-Mo.
Well, and I said, John Ledger is trying to do this Un-Carrier thing. This is your brand. You have to get on board. So clearly we were all pushing them into this marriage.
It's all the journalists again. We just manipulate everything in the background. Yeah, no. Anyway, but the point is, it's interesting. I think that this phone has all the bands, and interesting that it'll be obsolete in a year because there'll be a Snapdragon, whatever, 895 or something. I don't know. That's what the rumor calls it. And then it won't be the latest thing, but it will still have bands that still won't have been implemented, right? Because it's going to take, a decade, 5 years for some of these bands to come online?
I mean, broadly, sure. If you're looking at C-band in the US, we're going to get the first 46 markets at the beginning of next year, but the rest of the nation doesn't open up until 2024.
So what is C-band? You just wrote a great article. I'm going to link to it. Obviously keep in mind that some of the audience here is not in the US, but maybe some of this applies to them as well.
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain C-band, especially for people outside the US, is that it is the 5G band that most of the rest of the world uses, but that the previous US FCC did not have its act together to free up and start auctioning. That most of the world's 5G is operating in what most of the world might call the 3.5 gigahertz band. And that's all of your Korean 5G. It's a lot of your European 5G, not Canada. Canada is much more in the US zone. They haven't even auctioned 3.5 yet. But that is mid-band, and mid-band is kind of the sweet spot when it comes to a combination of having available bandwidth for fast connections and not having to put a cell site every 1,000 feet.
Yeah, it's the sweet spot, right? Like
Yep.
it's not great for like the great deserts of Arizona, but it's kind of perfect for suburbia and potentially some urban centers.
Right, it'll go half a mile to a mile or so.
Nice.
And so here in the US, however, T-Mobile because of the Sprint purchase, was the only carrier that had a significant amount of free mid-band spectrum. And the US realized it was falling behind, and therefore pushed ahead. There was a lot of politics involved. There was a lot of debating with the previous holders of the C-band spectrum, who were these private satellite companies who had gotten it in the 1980s. But eventually, about 280 megahertz of C-band was freed up in two phases at the end of 2021 and the end of 2024.
That's like a gold mine of megahertz.
I mean, the full C-band in the US is more like 500 megahertz. And because I have no personal love for private TV satellite downlink companies, I was just like, put them out of business, give it all the 5G. But of course, I'm extremely on one side of this debate.
I mean, you and I have very similar views on this, right? Like the good of the people, right? The good of the majority. And the FCC has always been, supposedly, which has been the case, but, they are theoretically keeping our airwaves, our public airwaves in check for the private industry to use,
but
right?
what this means for users is that starting at the beginning of next year, Verizon gets 60 megahertz and AT&T gets 40 megahertz in a lot of the country, a lot of the populated areas of the country. And that will give them, both Verizon and AT&T, for the first time, a distinctly different 5G experience than 4G. Where right now,
you mean one that doesn't suck?
Well, right now their 5G is just 4G with a different indicator.
Exactly.
And when this C-band comes online...
Remember, except for AT&T, which indicates 5G for 4G, so...
Excellent point. And they indicate 4G for 3G. But
I hate them so much.
But what this means is at the end of the year, we are going to hopefully start getting this more Europe-like 5G experience in a lot of these major metro areas on Verizon and AT&T if you have the right phone.
Well, okay, so... I was just going to ask you, what are the right phones right now? All of Samsung and Apple's, I presume?
Well, all the most recent Samsung.
Yeah, like this past year.
Yeah, the 21s, the 12s, the
A series, A52s, A32s, all of those.
I think that the most recent ones, the Pixel 5,
OnePlus,
the OnePlus 9s, but not the T-Mobile Nords.
Of course not,
because T-Mobile
they're bespoke.
Yeah, T-Mobile isn't using C-band.
I mean, I kind of feel like OnePlus is just selling these unlocked just to be able to say we're selling them unlocked. Like there's just no rhyme or reason behind it at this point. You don't want to use these phones on anything else.
So the rhyme or reason behind it is that OnePlus has a retailing deal with Best Buy that gives them visual retail visibility. That basically, so so they don't intend to necessarily sell a lot of these, as you said, unlocked Nords, but they want people walking through Best Buys to be able to see a OnePlus display and understand that this is a mainstream phone maker.
Right.
This is a brand you can rely on that's associated with other reliable retail brands.
And you know what? I think that's true. I think that, the mainstream still doesn't 100% understand this, but I think that even the non-tech savvy at this point is starting to understand that there are really three brands in the US: Apple, Samsung, and OnePlus. Like it used to be LG the third, right?
So no Motorola? Motorola's out for you?
I think Moto is like LG stylo, right? You walk into the store and you get the free phone that you get with your virtual network operator prepaid plan. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think people go out to buy a Moto. They've heard of it, like they've heard of Nokia, but I don't think they've seen a Moto phone recently. I don't see Moto phones out there. Mind you, I don't see OnePlus phones either. But I think that, with LG dropping off, Moto is going to have to like get some sort of Halo product that doesn't suck. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Edge Plus was a great phone. It just didn't, it had so many issues and Verizon exclusive. Moto just has to stop making Verizon exclusive and has to stop making crappy phones with Snapdragon 480 that sell for $400. Like that stylus phone that I just reviewed. Like you look at the OnePlus side by side with that and you're like, the only difference is the stylus and $200. Like why would I spend that kind of money?
Well, in the case of the Moto phone, that is so specifically an attempt to grab the G Stylo. The G Stylo market.
But the price is too high. That phone should have been like $250 to $300.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the 480, honestly, it wasn't that great on the OnePlus, but it was even worse on the Moto, performance-wise.
I mean, yeah, sure, but the 480... okay, so the 480 is an incredible step forward for the 4 series.
Yeah, but it's really a 6 series if you look at it.
It's a 6 series. It's a 6 series with a 4 name. It should have a 4 price.
Yeah, granted, that's true. All of that's true. But when you look up MediaTek's proposition next to that, the 700, it's a way better chip, in my opinion, performance-wise, for less money. I mean, I think MediaTek's killing it in that area right
And now, speaking of MediaTek, one of the things that Qualcomm is nervous about is, I don't know if you saw that notice that the OnePlus Nord 2 is going to use a Dimensity 1200.
And it will, because, they want to make us flagship killer again. And I'm welcoming OnePlus trying to disrupt again because, I'm hoping there's a bit of backlash going on with, Pete Lau and the team over there that is Oppifying to death the OnePlus brand. Like, I get what they're doing. I understand the strategy. It all makes perfect sense. Look, they're growing up, but they have this great brand and this great audience still. And, in places where Oppo is unknown, like North America, OnePlus is the BBK brand. But you can't just throw out that niche. You need to somehow address that niche. And the OnePlus Nord last year, we never got. But I reviewed it, and I tell you, Sascha, one of the top 5 phones of 2020. Like, it was pretty much in all ways OnePlus 8 with a 765 for $300 less. Like, they were not making money on that phone. There's no way they were making money on that phone.
Well, my newsletter tomorrow is about how OnePlus's communications have become a mess over the past 6 months, and how
so bad
there are various situations in which they could have spun things to their absolute benefit and glory, but their communications team and their messaging team seem to be in chaos, just seem to be in total confusion.
So that takes us to the next topic, which I want to talk about. I know we're going to skip over this real quick, but before I continue, there's one item that I forgot to ask, and I know we're going back again, but do you know if that Qualcomm phone has wireless charging?
I don't believe it does.
And that, I think, is a major miss at $1,500.
I really wonder what the Asus, what Asus manufacturing issue led to that.
The fingerprint sensor in the middle of the back of the phone is what led to that,
Yeah.
and the glowing logo, because I cannot believe they didn't put it under display. Like, that thing looks so old school from the back,
Well, they didn't. Okay, so this is something I understand why they did it, but I don't understand why they did it, which is
Right.
that they said that they did not put the fingerprint sensor under the display because they used a rigid rather than a flexible OLED panel. And the fingerprint sensor can only go under the display if it's a flexible OLED.
Flexible.
But they didn't explain why they had to use a rigid rather than a flexible OLED.
Weird indeed. Because, you're right. The other phones with that display have an optical in-display fingerprint
Right.
sensor. Huh. Well, anyway, let's move back to OnePlus because, oh boy, are people pissed this week about OnePlus. And I really don't understand why, honestly. This is, to me, people overreacting. For once, OnePlus in the past has, made their benchmark result look better by increasing clock speed on benchmark apps, like artificially. And that's not cool, right? But this is not the case. What we're talking about here is that they've lowered the clock speed. Like, they're making it a little slower to run some apps to preserve battery. And as I said, again, I don't want to be mean, but the 888, every 888 I've reviewed and benchmarked, because hardware does benchmarks and I've been doing benchmarks for them, it shows that it just cannot handle long-term performance because it just throttles down because of thermals, unless you have a fan in there. And there's a few phones that do it well, like Xiaomi Mi 11, but generally it's a problem. And so you got to find a compromise between how perceivably the phone feels versus how much battery you're eating. And if you're not running a game or running a benchmark, why not throttle down a little bit? Like, it's so fast already. It's so optimized, Oxygen OS. You're not going to notice.
And this is entirely, as you're pointing out, a communications problem
Exactly.
for OnePlus.
Yep.
Because what this comes back to is that OnePlus built for many years a brand on concepts like ultimate burdenless speed, and we are very open and participatory with our community. And so what you're feeling here is not any there's not any real problem with performance. What you're feeling here is the community feels betrayed because they weren't brought in on this decision.
And it's the nth betrayal too now. It's
Yes.
like, we got the crappy Nord sent to North America when we were never got the good Nord. And now they're teasing us with another Nord that we probably won't get with a Dimensity 1200.
I like the N10 5G though.
Yeah, and the OnePlus 9 and 9 Pro, they were too expensive, really. Like the problem with the OnePlus 9 is that it has no OIS and has a plastic frame. And at that price point, you might as well go buy Galaxy Fan Edition, and whether you buy the last year's or the upcoming. And then the 9 Pro is super awesome. It checks every box, but you can buy, as I said, a Galaxy S21 Ultra for less than $1,100 with 256 gigs of storage right now. Why would you buy a OnePlus 9?
But so, spoiling my newsletter tomorrow, here is what they should have done. And what they should have done is that in the OnePlus 9, like buried in settings somewhere, they should have had a toggle. And the toggle is optimized mode versus extreme mode. And it's set to optimized mode, which does exactly the thing that they do right now, which throttles when necessary. But it's buried in there, and the fans who really want to find it can turn it off and switch it to extreme mode. And then everybody talks about how great it is that it can be extreme if it wants to, but it's optimized because they're smart and caring. But no, this is a communications failure where they weren't talking to their people, and their people feel betrayed.
Yeah, it's the same thing as Apple kind of did with when they were throttling performance for battery life, right? Like for older phones. And I think engineering-wise, it makes perfect sense. Like, it's actually super smart. But then you, as a customer, you feel like, it's planned obsolescence. Like, how Apple did not nip this one in the bud before somebody discovered it is crazy to me.
But also, like, I can see that from Apple's arrogance and Apple's general we know best, Apple's general we're a closed system perspective. But OnePlus's entire brand
I know
was built differently, and that's what I fear they're ruining right now as they turn into Oppo. Yeah.
Do you think that Carl Pei left because of this general change in philosophy that Pete Lau wanted to kind of essentially consolidate Oppo, Realme, and OnePlus into one?
I don't know what the chicken and the egg are there. I don't know if it's happening because Carl left, or I don't know if that's why Carl left. I know Carl leaving has something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not I'm not here for the gossip. I'm just kind of curious what you think, because I've always felt that it was maybe not a bit more of A than B. Like, I think that the Nord was such a brilliant product, the original. And then when we got the N10 and then 200, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, no alert slider, all plastic. Like, what are you talking about? These are not Nord phones. This is not what we were expecting. We were expecting you to go down market, but keep it like, we didn't want just another renamed Oppo Reno or Oppo A series, right?
So to explain, I have a story about the band U2 that illuminates what is going on at OnePlus. And so
I love you so much, Sascha. Go on. This is great.
So long ago, somebody was interviewing Bono. Okay. And for the younger listeners of this podcast, Bono is the singer in a popular 1980s band called U2 out of Ireland. And so somebody was interviewing Bono, and of course Bono was like talking himself up and talking up the lead guitarist, The Edge. And meanwhile, the other two guys, Larry and the guy whose name I always forget, were kind of in the background not talking.
Right.
And the interviewer says to Bono, so you're talking about like what you and The Edge do with all the songwriting and with all the creation, but there's two other guys in the band. Like, there's Larry. What does Larry do? And Bono says, Larry says no.
Ha! Nice.
And that, I feel like, was a certain interaction between Pete and Carl that now that they've broken apart, unfortunately, you are now seeing what happens with both of them when the other one isn't there to say no.
Yeah, basically. So Carl Pei said no.
Carl Pei, in a lot of cases, said no. He probably said no to the 5 budget models at once made of plastic, Yeah. Carl would have said no to that.
He would have said no to the OnePlus 9 having no OIS and having a plastic chassis.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of BBK Group, there's a bunch of other things. And this kind of ties in with this Qualcomm trying to like, hey, we exist and make phones now again, but don't make phones because, well, we do not want to hurt anybody's feelings. Oppo, like Xiaomi, is rumored to be making a custom ISP for their phones. And I have to tell you, Sascha, and I don't know if I told you this at dinner in New York, but the Oppo Find X3 Pro is my favorite flagship phone of 2021 so far. The only reason I can't use it is I'm stuck on 3G when I put a T-Mobile SIM in it. It's that bad. But in terms of band support. But it's such a good phone. The camera system is so well tuned. I think it's better than, it's the same cameras essentially as the 9, but it's better in terms of performance. You know, they're obviously using the Snapdragon 888 ISP here, but it seems to me like Xiaomi's also done some incredible work with camera phones like the Mi 11 Ultra. And it seems to me like they're plateauing and maybe Qualcomm isn't giving them what they want or need to go next gen. And now they're making their own chips with ISPs in the same way as Google is rumored to have their own Whitechapel chip on the Pixel 6 series. So what gives Qualcomm, or do you think it's just the way the things are going?
I mean, I think there's definitely, there's definitely a desire to differentiate. It sounds like an ISP is a relatively discrete, affordable, manageable way to differentiate without having to go to designing your entire own SoC.
Yeah.
The way Google is doing now. And remember, Google started with an ISP.
Yeah, and FPGAs are faster too. Like, I think, if that's the way they're going, because if you think about, remember back when again, this is dating us, but the Nokia 808 PureView had a dedicated, FPGA ISP. And then when they went to the Nokia 1020, Lumia 1020, right, which had essentially the same sensor. Well, it's actually a slightly different sensor, but a 41 megapixel, whatever, with OIS this time. They actually used the Snapdragon S4 or whatever it was at the time, ISP, and it was like 5 times slower or something processing images, right? Because it's not a dedicated chip, and there's no way the application processor on the Symbian phone could have handled any of this at all. So they needed an ISP. So I'm not blaming Qualcomm or anything. I'm just pointing out that there is sometimes a good reason for dedicated ISP.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good reason for a dedicated... There is sometimes a good reason for a dedicated X, for any value of X.
But there seems to be a proliferation on potential future flagships of dedicated ISPs, which tells me that either Qualcomm's not delivering what the manufacturers want, or they're just... saving money in some way, but they're still going to have the chip in there. They're still going to have a Qualcomm chip in there, right? So
yeah, no, I think they're wanting to hard code some of their own algorithms in to make it much faster, and you can't necessarily do that with Qualcomm's off-the-shelf product.
I think you're right, but it's interesting, right? Because Xiaomi first, now Oppo. And of course, Google with Whitechapel, which we know is all about the ISP. We know Google is doing. Well, no,
Google had the Pixel ISP before Whitechapel.
Well, right. Yeah. Thanks for reminding us of the Pixel Core.
Exactly. They started this whole ball rolling.
God, Qualcomm must be so mad at them. No, I'm just kidding. And speaking of BBK Group, this is kind of just out there, so I had to kind of include it because it's kind of fun. It's a patent from Vivo where basically a tiny little drone is stored inside your phone and acts as the camera in the phone when it's stored inside the phone. So it's like it's got the cameras in the drone and it's stowed and there's a little window in the back so that you can use the cameras. And then you can just push a button and the thing flies out of your phone and just hovers that and does your selfie stick job. I mean, it seems silly, but at the same time, 5 years from now, this seems perfectly normal to me.
And I can just see it getting swatted out of the air and destroyed within minutes.
By somebody who's mad, yeah, for sure.
And I also suddenly think of, there was a phone in about 2008 called the LG Decoy, which had a Bluetooth headset that snapped into the back of the phone, which was also a very bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know. It's bad, but it's also good because it's Vivo. So it's like, they would do it. Like, Vivo makes some really great phones and they're the only BBK entity that's still kind of doing their own thing. So, I don't want to dismiss it. This would be very interesting if it happened. I think it would take up a third of the internal space of the phone though. So I'm not sure how practical.
It'll have a little backpack.
I mean, it's really small. It's like 3 by 3 centimeters or something or less. It's really small and it's got protected propellers so you could catch it.
Wait until that is used in any house that has a cat.
Oh my God, it's going to be so great. I can't wait for the TikTok videos. Let's switch gears to Samsung. There is very strong rumors of a Galaxy Unpacked event on August 11th that would introduce the new folding phones. And now there's even rumors of an affordable third folding phone. So we would get the Z Fold 3 and the Z Flip 3 and maybe a Z Flip Lite. And lots of rumors. And of course, the watches that they discussed at MWC. Wait, MWC happened, right?
Yeah.
We covered that last week on my show.
Yeah, no, it happened. I woke up at 4 a.m. and watched some video casts and called it a day.
It just feels so weird. Anyway, so all that stuff is going to happen. What's your prediction on this thing?
I mean, I'm really looking forward to the new flippable and the new foldable.
Who doesn't?
Exactly.
They're amazing. The Fold 2, I bought mine because they wouldn't give me a reunit. I bought it, returned it because I couldn't afford keeping a $2,000 phone, burning a hole in my pocket, getting obsolete in 6 months. I couldn't afford to do that.
But yeah, I'll tell you, in a very bleak year last year, the Z Fold 2 was a super fun, innovative breath of fresh air. It was a lot of fun to have around, and I want to see next.
I feel like 2020 was the year of Samsung. I feel like here's some of the milestones. They started off a little bleak because the S20 series, I think, other than the May S20, the S20 Ultra was a total miss. It underdelivered. It looked ugly.
The S20 Ultra was the worst reviewed Samsung flagship I think I've done since the original Galaxy S.
Yeah, but it had so many problems, and it was ugly on top of that, and it came in an ugly color. And then they blew our minds at the same time with the Z Flip. The Z Flip is such a great phone to this day, and you can get the 5G version now. Then it got better when we got, of course, the Z Fold 2, which was really, as you said, the mother of all phones for 2020.
And then
the Note 20, which, in my opinion, is the best phone that is not a weird folding whatever. It's it was the flagship for 2020. That Note 20 just killed it. I never used the stylus on it, but I just love the bronze, the squareness of it, the cameras on that. Finally, they got their cameras in order. That thing was just killer. And then, of course, we got the S20 Fan Edition, which was just out OnePlusing OnePlus, basically giving OnePlus the big finger saying, hey, we can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, the FE set the benchmark for the next 6 to 9 months for mid-range phones in the US. The FE, because it's Samsung and nothing is ever sold at list price. And so the list price is notional, and they're always cheaper in reality.
Like Moto.
I guess so, yeah. The FE basically set this bar and said, this is, you're going to have to be this tall to ride on the ride now. And
and OnePlus wasn't even in the game anymore at that point. There's no way they could compete. It was amazing. And the A series took the US by storm. We haven't seen a mid-range be this successful in the US in years. So, so far the Samsung in 2021, I mean, the S21 Ultra is a masterpiece in terms of imaging.
Completely what the S20 Ultra should have been. Absolutely.
Correct. And better than that because they have 2 telephotos now. And then also much nicer industrial design. I feel like it's so much more premium. And then, we're waiting for the rest, really. We know there's an S Fan Edition coming, and wow, is it going to be ever awesome. And then, of course, the folding phones.
Are you okay with no Note?
Well, in this case, yes, because we have the S21, and I'm not a stylus user. But if they do make a Note 21, I hope they make a Note 21 that's as good as the Note 20 was last year, because that was great.
Let me show you, of course, what I have here, which is my S21 Ultra with the stylus case.
Oh, you've got the little stylus case. It's so wide already that I feel like that's a miss. That's one of the things that made the Note 20 so usable. It was very narrow for a big phone, right? Because they had that wide aspect ratio and the stylus built in. So I think that's kind of what I liked about it in some ways. But look, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a big deal. We're going to get, it's like Apple's events. We're going to get bombarded with Galaxy everything for a while there. The other phone that I should mention for this year from Samsung that I think is a solid one that really kicks butt is the A52 5G. There's a bunch of A50s, A30s and whatever, but I think the 52 in particular.
Our reviewer, Steven, who does our mid-range phones, he had some performance problems with the A52.
But I think if you look on paper,
it's good, but he said that there's something in the software on the A52 which is really dragging it down, unfortunately.
And it's a Snapdragon 750G. Yeah, maybe that's Samsung has not managed to optimize like the rest of the gang has, because the 750G even on the TCL 20 Pro 5G was pretty snappy actually.
I think he prefers the TCL 20 Pro 5G actually.
Well, I think it's a better phone in some ways. It's just the software. TCL just needs, I don't know. It's just the software on that thing, the camera software on that thing. Oh my God, what a mess. Last thing, well, couple of things. We talked about CarPlay a lot. The Nothing Ear 1 true wireless earbuds that have been rumored forever are supposed to come out later this month. I'm in touch with their PR people. They haven't committed to anything.
Who isn't in touch with their PR people?
Well, I mean, I'd like to get a review in it. It'd be nice. But $99 is what's supposed to cost with ANC. I don't know. Like, there's so many true wireless earbuds right now. A lot of them have ANC. Even some at that price point. There might not be big brands, but some of them are really, really good. Chinese made, no-name brands from Amazon that I've tried that are really great and compelling. I don't think you need to buy a real big brand pair of earbuds these days to get good sound and good ANC. And so I'm not sure how they're going to compete there.
Yeah. So what I'm worried about. So we were talking earlier about how we worried about Pete without Carl. And
right.
What I'm worried about with Carl without Pete is that he makes something pretty which has a strong reality distortion field around it, but not the core engineering.
Yeah. Well, they do have Teenage Engineering as their...
No, but Teenage Engineering is not an engineering company. It's a design. Yeah, it's a design firm. So what I'm worried about here is that it's all design.
Right. Could be. It's hard to mess up true wireless earbuds with ANC these days, though.
Yeah, I guess it is. As you said, it's somewhat...
It's not like you're making a phone. Like, you could really mess up a phone.
It's somewhat commodity. Yeah. And so maybe your design and your reality distortion field turn out to be the true differentiators.
But where do you go from here? Like, who does just like... How can you build a entire brand around just... true wireless earbuds with ANC for $99 in 2021. Like if it was 5 years ago when AirPods were new, I'd say, yeah, you've got a chance. Probably it wouldn't be $99. But the point is, it's a completely saturated market at this point.
I get the feeling that this is what he could afford to build.
Right. He needed to start somewhere.
He needed to start somewhere, exactly. And there have been various people who have started with a phone, and then that has been a disaster because that's such that is such an investment. And I'm thinking of Essential primarily.
Oh my God, they acquired the Essential brand, and actually in a statement he said that there's no intention of making an Essential anything. Is that one of the branding options they had was calling themselves Essential, and they realized if they might do that, they should acquire the Essential brand because it was available. Kind of like Palm being made by that startup that then got manufactured by TCL.
Yeah, but so he is aware of Essential and he's aware of the story of Essential. He doesn't want to be Essential. And that means your first product isn't a $700 flagship smartphone that you need to sink, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars into developing.
Right. And that makes me wonder about where they're going to go from here. Like, headphones, are they an audio brand or are they just going to make some random accessory mobile devices?
Yeah,
what?
Are they an accessories brand? Are they going to be like Anchor, but with design?
Ooh, Anchor with design. Yeah, Anchor does need some design love, don't they? I don't know. It's just, I can't wrap my head around this. I want it, though. I want to try it out because I love a good pair of true wireless ANC earbuds. And there's still a lot of opportunity to be had there. So, last topic here, we could have a good rant on this one, and I think we should. The Nokia flagship leak. Like the rumors are building up for a November launch. Who launches a phone in November?
Is there some kind of Chinese holiday or something?
Well, maybe, but I'm thinking, you're right. A lot of this points at being a Chinese-only product, right? How do you feel about Nokia under the HMD tutelage? I feel very mixed about it.
I mean, I feel that ultimately they have driven themselves into being one of those mid-range companies.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of emotional...
Everybody seems to be one of those mid-range companies now.
There's still a lot of emotional love for them, especially in Europe.
I mean, I like the branding. I like the designs usually, but I feel that they're not delivering that great in terms of value, right? Like the specs are not that exciting and the prices are not that exciting.
They're certainly not differentiating. Now, that said, last year, the Nokia 5.3 was one of our top picks for a low-cost phone in the US.
I do have the 5.3 in the drawer. I didn't get a chance to really use. It's not the kind of phone I would use. I hate to say this, but it needs to have at least something a little better than there. But so people like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a case of people were flocking to some extent more to the European brand and the European design language over when your other choices are TCLs and ZTEs. But that isn't going to be a self-perpetuating company. That's when you're running on fumes. And I think one of the points you're making is that they haven't had a high-end defining idea for 2-3 years now.
Yeah, and then, when they tried to launch what was essentially their flagship last year, which the 765G 8.3 was overpriced and completely underdelivered in every aspect, not even just performance and specs, but design even. It was so staid, especially once Verizon got their hands on it. And it's just like, I don't understand where you're going with this. And it took them forever to ship it too. They announced at MWC or around the time of MWC, since it didn't really happen. And then it was just like we got it like in the summer in Europe and then in November or October in the US for a price that you could buy a Galaxy Fan Edition plus some accessories. It was ridiculous.
I mean, there's three things that people want from Nokia for it to be, or Nokia, for it to be called Nokia. Okay. And those three things are, number one, they want European patriotism and a European sense of identity. They need it to deliver that. Number two, they want the kind of fun candy store type design that was familiar from the Lumia era.
Uh-huh.
And number three, they want the groundbreaking, mind-blowing camera capabilities that got put in everything from the N80 and the N95 up to the PureViews. And unfortunately, this HMD Nokia seems to be firing on none of those cylinders.
I know they have such a history to play from. Like the Lumia brand, the early one, especially as you said, the candy colors, the super high quality polycarbonate machined finishes. Like, why not bring that back in a modern form factor? Make it a little more affordable since you're made in China and you have deals with Shenzhen. And then, add some decent camera. Like, it doesn't even have to be special per se, but at least nail the basics of camera. Put OIS on your lenses, good software, good sensors, good lenses, Zeiss branded. Don't put sticker cams with 2 megapixel macros that do nothing. Like, just make a Snapdragon 700 series 5G phone that costs $500, $600, competes with TCL here, and gives us an even better imaging experience, that nice Android One experience, and some beautiful industrial design from the Lumia days. You're done.
I would say Nokia needs to make the TikTok phone.
That's right. TikTok phone.
They need to make the TikTok phone. They need to make it optimized with the camera and with the design that an 18-year-old girl in Italy who is constantly making dance TikToks wants to be in all of her videos.
100%. It seems that they're just sitting on their laurels. Like, I don't even know how they're successful right now. I guess they sell a lot of 5.3s, right?
Maybe.
Weird. So, hey, one thing we skipped over that I want to talk with you about to wrap up, because it's so egregious to me. I had such a conversation with George yesterday in email. I think he hates me now. Verizon Adaptive Sound.
What is that even?
I can't even.
I know.
That's my... Like, I mean, like, what? Like, this is my email to him. Why must Verizon always reinvent the wheel? ? Smiley.
Because they don't want to be a dumb pipe.
I told him in my next email, I said, Verizon is a dumb pipe. It has no business having its own terrible messaging app or its own adaptive sound implementations when Dirac, DTS, Dolby, Apple, Sony provide compelling adaptive audio functionality of their own and to other products.
You know that Verizon and AT&T will both die on the hill of we are not dumb pipes, we are intelligent application providers.
Can Verizon Messenger die already? Like, who does that? Like, Google has the best messaging app, and it sucks. It has the best messaging app because of RTS, whatever, right? Like, give us that as the stock app. That's what everybody's doing. Everybody's putting the stock app, the RCS app.
I think we need to arrange a trade of hostages where if we offer to write enough articles about mobile edge compute, they will terminate Verizon Messenger.
Maybe. I mean, I just don't understand this. Like, okay, spatial audio, whatever. That's not even spatial audio. What do they call it? Adaptive sound. What does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, we've been reading the articles, we've been writing the articles. No one is quite sure exactly what it means. It's
like if it is something that adapts the audio based on your environment, that's been done before. There's lots of APIs and SDKs out there for existing phone manufacturers to use. Moto does that.
I've heard Snapdragon Sound works quite well.
Exactly, that's another solution. And for all we know, there's guaranteed this was not done in-house. Guaranteed this is a rebranded of a third party. But like, why? And then to lump it on this 6-month-old Moto One 5G Ace rebranded with the UW branding from Verizon, it's like, it's not even a good phone. Like, I reviewed it. It's not a good phone. Don't buy it.
But Moto are, as you pointed out earlier in this call, and now we're calling back to all sorts of things which we talked about, Moto are Verizon's kind of in-house pets.
True.
They will do what Verizon wants in exchange for, primary placement and a lot of promotion. But yeah, I don't know why Verizon is trying to do this. This harkens back to Vcast.
Yeah, I feel bad for George because he's got to peddle that stuff. Look, it's just like, it was one of those WTF moments for me this week. I'm like, why? Like, I almost thought not even bothering to include it, but then it's just, I figured with you on, we would have a good laugh about it.
Yeah, but I'm not going to cry for Verizon. Listen, it's July right now. In 6 months, they're going to flip the switch on 100 million people's worth of C-band, and we're going to be pumping our fists, and they're going to have a network that they can talk about. And I think until then, they're trying to maintain some sort of position for innovation.
Yeah, we can see right through your lies. I will end it on that. Sascha, you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at PCMag.com. I am constantly on Twitter as Sascha Segan, and I have my weekly newsletter, Sascha Segan's Race to 5G. You can find that just by Googling the words PCMag newsletters, and you'll get the sign-up screen.
Sweet. You should sign up, folks. It's a good one. And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character Tankgirl without the vowels. Twitter is where you should go to talk with me and Sascha about this podcast. If you have questions, comments, whatever, please put them there. Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures taken with phones and pretty pictures of phones and all kinds of content related to the podcast that's visual. So check that out. There's also visual content on my 2 YouTube channels. YouTube.com/MobileTechPodcast is where the main channel is. You want to see unboxings, hands-on, that kind of thing. Hands-ons once we get them again. Check that out. Then there's a new channel my producer and I have been working on, trying to get some content, trying to get those 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize. It's called youtube.com/MobileTechMore, and it's all about the accessory world, the anchors and the ear ones from...
Nothing Essential.
That's right. Nothing Essential. Check that out. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. You can find RSS feed there if you're old school. But, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found, you'll find the show. And if your app lets you rate or review the podcast, please consider doing that. It would be super helpful. And folks, if you want to help the podcast, consider joining Patreon. We have a Patreon now for a few weeks. So patreon.com/TNKGRL, that's Tankgirl. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. I want to thank Rick H. for joining this week. Thanks, Rick, for being a supporter. If you're wondering what it's about, well, there's different tiers. You can just donate some money to help out, or you can get some special things depending what tier you pick. There's a Discord channel. You can chat with me if you'd like. But more importantly, I make a video version of this podcast now, and it's just, a Skype call with my guest, like here with Sascha, and you get to see us in person ahead of the audio show. And you get to see us unedited too, because I'm not going to go through making it all clean and nice. You're going to get it kind of raw the same day. It's exciting. And then 2 days later, you get the audio version. So if you want the exclusive video version, join Patreon. I would love your support. And I want to thank the existing patrons for being awesome. And again, the Discord chat is there if you want to talk with me and you're a patron. I also want to point out that if you don't want to do the Patreon thing, you can actually use a PayPal link that's in the show notes. So check it out. Go to tankgirl.com. It's in there. And then there's a PayPal button. You can contribute that way. I also want to thank Audible. Audible's been a long-time sponsor for years now, and I want to thank them for being super awesome and supporting the show. But you can help them help us by getting a 30-day free trial on Audible and keeping a free book if you leave. It's pretty awesome. If you stay, though, it's even better. audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL. It's pretty great. So if you don't know Audible, well, let me tell you, it's very simple. It's basically a audiobook platform. If, like me, you're a bookworm and you like to read books, but you'd rather listen to books instead, well, Audible's got you covered. They're the platform. That's what they do. They do more than that, though. They have podcasts, they have short stories, they have a whole bunch of stuff. But if you're like me and you like long-term audio format stuff, you're on a road trip, you want to listen while you drive, that kind of thing, Audible's got you covered. Lots of books read by the authors. It's really fantastic. And again, you pick up a book, you read for 2 hours, you put it back down. It takes a few days. It's the same deal here. Yeah, you can listen for hours on end if you want. Consider joining Audible, audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So check that out. And thanks again to Audible for being our longtime sponsor. And Sascha, thank you for being a guest on the show yet again.
I'm always happy to show up. Let's talk again. We have our big annual road test on the road right now,
Right.
Fastest Mobile Networks. We've just been through our first 3 cities, and we have 27 to go. So when we have all 30 down in August, maybe let's talk about it.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to hear what the state of 5G looks like. So I'll get you on for that. And folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.